What does game changer mean? Is it a good idea to learn a third language by using a second language? What do we think of how the Spanish educational system teaches English? We answer more of your questions in this episode of
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
Hello, my name's Craig.
And my name's Reza.
And if you are a new listener, if you have just found the podcast, you're very, very welcome. With nearly 50 years of teaching English between us, Reza and I are going to help you improve your English and take it to the next level. How are you, Reza?
I'm fine, Craig. Despite the heat, we're recording here in August. We don't know when you're listening. You could be listening anytime, but we're recording in August in Spain, and it's warm.
But not here, because I must say that we're recording in Reza's flat today, his recently refurbished and brand new flat, which is really, really comfortable, and it has air conditioning because my air conditioning is broken. So I'm really happy that Reza is hosting our podcast today.
You really don't want air conditioning to be broken in Valencia in August if you can avoid it.
You do not. You definitely do not.
By the way, Craig, before I came to Spain, particularly Valencia, for me, air conditioning was a thing of luxury. I didn't really think about it. I don't know anybody in the UK or Ireland who has air conditioning in their car, for example. Why would you bother? Can you imagine, folks? We don't have air conditioners in our cars in the UK and Ireland. You just open the window, right?
Yeah, it's usually cold enough. You don't need air conditioning. But here, with our English blood, we definitely do.
But believe me, when I got air conditioning, because I was one of the poor people here who didn't have it before, it truly, truly was a game changer, if ever there was. It was a game changer for me. We'll talk about that more in a minute.
First, this week we have a voice message from our friend Alejandro.
Hi, Craig and Reza. How are you guys? It's a pleasure to say hello again. Just a small thing to mention. Did you notice that in the episode number 219, you somehow predicted the current pandemic around the world? When Reza asked Craig about he believed it or not in the zombie apocalypse is a peculiar thing. That's it, guys. Thank you for your time. See you around.
Yeah, thank you, Alejandro. And yes, that's true, isn't it? Back in when we recorded that episode, we spoke about the possibility of a pandemic. 2 years ago it was.
2 years ago, and we were right. There's a lot of conspiracy theories out there. I don't want Craig and I to be added to the list. Did we start the coronavirus? No, we did not. We simply predicted there might be a pandemic.
Any comments on Alejandro's message?
I thought it was a very good message, and generally your pronunciation was quite good, but I noticed one or two things, Craig. Did you notice anything?
Well, he did say, Reza asked Craig about he believed or not the zombie apocalypse. We can improve that, can't we?
Yeah, that doesn't sound quite right. What about this? Reza asked Craig if or whether he believed there would be a zombie apocalypse or not, or there could be a zombie apocalypse or not. That would be better, I think.
Yeah. Also, Alejandro, be careful of your pronunciation of that ed verb believed. You said believed. You added an extra syllable. No, it's believed. Reza asked Craig if he believed. Thanks very much for your message. And to remind you, back in August the 5th, 2018, here's what we said on that podcast.
Do you believe that zombies might exist in the future?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. There could be an epidemic. Maybe not zombies from The Walking Dead, but certainly an epidemic or a global disease could affect people and wipe out, which means kill, completely destroy a large proportion of the world's population. It's possible. What's next, Reza?
We've got another voice message, this time from Australia, but it's Carlos, who's a Brazilian living down under.
Hello, Craig. Hello, Hessa. Here's Carlos from Australia. Actually, I'm Brazilian, live in Australia, but thank you so much for using my question to do an episode. Was amazing. I really appreciate that. And I have another doubt because after 1 year and a half living in Australia, I feel confident with my English. Of course, my English is not the highest level, but I feel confident to talk. I can understand most of what people talk with me, and the Aussie English is not the easiest in the world. And I decided to start learning Spanish because I have plans to move to Spain in the next year or in 2 years. I don't know. I need to wait the pandemic to be sure about that. To learn Spanish, I decided to use some material in English because I think I will be improving both languages. Do you know something about this? Do you have any clue about that? Thanks so much. I hope everything is going good for you too. See you next.
Yes, that's an interesting question, isn't it, from Carlos there. Can it be advantageous? Is it a good idea to learn a third language using the second language that you've learned? His English is obviously very good, so is it a good idea for him to use English to learn or improve his Spanish?
Well, Carlos, we'll talk about that in a minute, but first let's improve your your English, because you did make a couple of tiny little mistakes. A very, 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 very common mistake. You said 1 year and a half. But no, it should be 1.5 years. So it's singular in Spanish, but it's actually plural in English if it's 1.5 years.
That's a very, very common error by Spanish speakers. Also, Carlos, you said, I understand most of what people talk with me. We can improve that with the verb say. So it's more common to say, I understand most of what people say to me. Remember, you say things to people. So I understand most of what people say to me.
Another mistake you made, which is typical of Spanish speakers, and I guess Brazilian Portuguese speakers as well, you said, I decided start learn Spanish. Now, we understand you, but really you need to add the word to and change learn to ing and say, I decided to start learning Spanish. That's because decide is followed by infinitive, decided to start, and that's because start is followed by ing, start learning.
And your fluency when you speak English, Carlos, is very, very good. Obviously, you're living in Australia, you're hearing English around you every day, and you are very fluent. What I would suggest is focus now on accuracy. So try and get rid of and correct those ingrained errors, those errors that you keep repeating, and just polish your English and with examples that we've just given, and start focusing more on accuracy because your fluency is very, very good.
Apart from really good pronunciation, I noticed you're beginning to get a bit of an Australian accent, which is great. Go for it, mate.
G'day, mate. So what do you think, Reza? Is it a good idea to learn Spanish by using English, do you think?
You're talking about specifically in Carlos' case, yeah?
In Carlos's case, or using a second language to learn a third. For example, if we wanted to learn Portuguese, is it a good idea for us to use Spanish to learn Portuguese?
That's a trickier question. For me, it's not the same, you see. It depends on your own ideas. In general, I think once you've learned a second language, it's always going to be easier to learn a third, fourth, fifth in general. But that's not his question. His question specifically, should you use your second language to learn the third? And for me, Carlos, it depends how different the three languages are. So we talk about L1, L2, L3. L1 is your native language, the language you speak as your mother tongue. If the L1, the native language, and the L3, the third language, are very similar, closely related, then I believe, and many other people agree, that using another language in the middle, your second language, to learn the third language can be particularly useful. Let's take an example. Imagine you're a Spanish native speaker. So that's your L1, your first language. And now you want to learn Portuguese as your third language because you've already learned English. So you're a Spanish native speaker, you've learned English as your second language, L2, and now you want to learn Portuguese as your third language. In that case, it might be a good idea to learn Portuguese using English. And the reason is because, as you know, Spanish and Portuguese are very similar. And you might think, but hold on, that's ideal. But it isn't. The problem is that it causes confusion. And because so many words and phrases are very, very, very similar, but not exactly the same. And you just use your first language rather than the foreign language, and people will understand you, and you never quite perfect it. Whereas if it's very different, it's much easier to perfect. I mean, English and Arabic, they're not similar at all. You can't say, something in English and it will more or less do in Arabic. No. But Spanish, Portuguese, I mean, I don't know, Bahia, Bay, and Bahia. I don't know. Does it really matter? Are you going to be misunderstood? No. But the pronunciation is slightly different. Todo. Everything, todo. It's not the same, but it's very similar. But if you just say it the Spanish way, you'll be perfectly understood. So there's the temptation that you don't quite perfect it. You know what I mean? That's my theory.
I do know what you mean, and I think that's a very good point. But let me ask you this. What if you are a native Spanish speaker? You probably have some level of English, especially if you're listening to this podcast. So imagine you want to learn Chinese or Arabic with a different alphabet, a different way of writing, and very different sounds. Would it be a good idea in that case to use English, your second language, to learn Chinese?
I'm not so sure about that. For me, that's much, much harder to answer. For me, it's much clearer that if the first and third language are very similar, to perfect the third language better, using a second language in the middle is useful. However, Craig's case, I'm not sure. What's your theory? What do you think?
My sense is that it would be useful because you're not only learning Chinese, you're also improving your English. So you're using the second language, you're perfecting the second language. Let's say you're B2 or C1 level, you already have a good level of English and you're perfecting it because you're learning Chinese through that language. My sense is that it would be a good idea.
But would you agree with this theory that I've got, which is kind of similar to my first theory, that again, the second and third language would have to be quite different?
Yes.
If you're Spanish, for example, and you want to learn, let's say, Dutch. Dutch is the language spoken in Holland, by the way, not Germany. Dutch, Hollandaise. So you're Spanish, you want to learn Dutch. I reckon it's a very bad idea to learn Dutch through German if you're Spanish. I can see you getting into a real confuddle, because they're so similar.
I agree with
you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. By the way, Carlos, if you are interested in learning Spanish using English, I can recommend a good podcast for you. It's called Coffee Break Spanish. There's a link in the show notes, and the show notes can be found at inglespodcast.com/326. And it's a Scottish teacher who's married to a Spanish woman, and they're teaching Spanish. So it's kind of teaching through English because the Scottish man is the host of the podcast. He uses his wife to pronounce perfect Spanish, and it's a very, very well-made podcast. So again, try that podcast. I think that will help you learn Spanish by using your second language, English.
And if you want to have a bit of a laugh, if you want to see the funny side of this, in the show notes, there's a couple of links to YouTube clips of precisely what I was talking about. People who speak Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese or Portuguese. One is Pele and the other is, I think it's Ronaldo, speaking Spanish. Ronaldo speaks pretty good Spanish now, but he didn't in his younger days. And you can see exactly what I mean because they say things like "Buenos dias a todos," things like that. It's because, it'll do. Todos. What difference does it make? So you'll see it. Basically, watch any interview with any Brazilian or Portuguese footballer speaking Spanish and you'll see what I mean.
By the way, that recommendation I gave earlier of Coffee Break Spanish, they also have different languages. So there's Coffee Break French, Coffee Break German, etc. So if you are interested in learning another language, it's a recommended podcast.
I'm just remembering now, many, many years ago when I first arrived in Valencia in 1998, and I still had quite a lot of work to do on my Spanish. And I was in a class in the Escuela Oficial de Idiomas, the official language school, learning Spanish. It was a big class. There was about 20 people in it of various nationalities. But it just so happened, by chance, that of those 20 or 25 people, about 12 were Brazilian. There was a big group of Brazilians, yeah, just by chance. And the problem which I'm telling you happened to me even in a kind of reverse way, because there were so many Brazilians speaking Spanish and they had interference from Portuguese that me and the rest of my classmates who were not Brazilian kind of copied them because we weren't quite sure what was right. Because we weren't sure if it was Buenos dias or Bom dias. So we kind of said, Bom dia? No, it's Buenos dias. But he just said Bom dia. Yeah, but he's Brazilian. It's like, all right. Well, him and 10 other people have just said it. So we're beginning to think, they might be right because it was so close. And that kind of happened to me and the Germans and the Italians, whatever. We kind of thought that the Brazilians might be right, but they were actually wrong because their language was so close to Spanish and we ended up copying them.
Next, we have a voice message from Anna from Spain.
Hey, my name is Anna and I'm from Spain. I would like to know your opinion about the Spain English level because we start to learn English since 6 or 8 years old, and now I'm 25 years old and I can speak English as a bilingual. Which problem do you think we have? Maybe it's our system education?
That's a very interesting question. Thank you, Anna, for sending in your voice message. There was one small thing you said with a tense. Did you catch that, Reza? She said we start since 6 years old.
I heard that, yeah. Well, actually, no, I'm not sure that. Maybe the tense is okay. You could say we start. For me, it's more the word since rather than the tense. You could say we start from 6 years old. As a kind of general statement.
So it would be better to say we start from 6 years old. So use the preposition from and not since. Also, you said, Anna, system education. Education system would be better, or educational system, using the adjective educational. So education system as a compound noun, or educational system.
And you ask, what's our opinion? Why is the level of English not better? Is it something to do with the Spanish education system? It might be. I don't know. Many people think it is. I'm sure it could be improved, but many countries could improve their education system. Perhaps a better question, Anna, is to throw it back at you, is why are British and Irish people so awful at foreign languages? Much, 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 much worse than Spanish or French, So don't feel inferior in any way. You make much more of an effort than we do.
I think a lot of us as English speakers expect people to speak English, so we don't make the effort and try to learn other languages. And that's why English people and British people and many English speakers are so bad at learning a second language. We don't have a lot of experience teaching in the state school system. So we know that there is something called CLIL, which is teaching other subjects like history, geography, science, physics, chemistry, using English to teach it. Now, that is, in theory, a good idea, but not if the level of the class isn't high enough, because then they're not going to be able to understand what they're being taught because they can't understand the English. So I don't know. I know that countries like Germany, Holland, many Scandinavian countries have a very high level of English, I used to think that it was because of the television being dubbed. In Spain, you did not used to be able to put the films and the TV programs in original version. Well, now you can. I don't know if that's still true because many people now are watching Netflix and you can choose if you listen in English. The countries that I've been traveling in and I've actually lived in that force you to listen to the original version with subtitles in their language, those countries usually have a higher level of English. I don't know if that's still true, but I think that was true maybe 20 years ago.
I completely agree with Craig, and I noticed that myself when I first came to Spain. I very quickly visited Portugal, and it was many years ago. And at that time in Portugal, as far as I know, you had no choice on on TV. English programs were in English with subtitles,
and the level of English was higher.
And it was higher. Yeah, it still is a bit, I would say, but then it was noticeably higher. Whereas in Spain, you had no choice; everything was dubbed. And I think the reason possibly for that is I'm going to pay a compliment in a way to Spain and at the same time criticize it at the same time is because Spanish culture and language is so important worldwide. Now, don't get offended, the Portuguese and Brazilian people, yours is as well, but there are many more countries in the world where Spanish is spoken and many Hispanic people living in the United States as well who continue to use Spanish. So Spanish culture and language being so important, it can kind of look after itself. It's kind of important. It's not to be underrated. I'm not saying Portuguese is not important as well, but it's not as big as Spanish. I mean, don't forget that more people speak Spanish as a native language than English. Whereas a lot more people speak English than Portuguese as a native language. So I reckon that's something to do with it. Simply the importance of the language.
And I'll say one more thing, Anna. We're living in a really interesting time now because of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. We don't know what's going to happen to the education system in Spain and around the world. And my feeling is it's going to change. It's going to be a lot more online. And I don't know how that's going to affect the way that Spanish speakers learn English and people learn languages around the world. But I'm very interested to follow it because I do think it needs to be improved. And I'm hoping that this switch or maybe hybrid model of education where you go online but you also have to go to classes sometimes, maybe that's going to improve the way we're learning languages, but we really don't know yet. It's too early. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just to go back to what you said earlier about CLIL, Craig was talking about, learning English to teach other subjects in school. I've kind of been involved in that in the sense that I was contracted by a secondary school in Valencia to teach English to the teachers.
How did you find their level?
Well, they did the best they could under the circumstances, but the whole thing was underfunded, which is the fault of the education system. So they had very little money to do it. So the range of level in my class went from about a low B1 to a C1. So B1, B2, C1. And to have all those people in a class that you see a couple of hours a week, you're not going to go very far. And about 20 people in the class. So it was underfunded. And the focus in the class was to be able to teach their subject in English. But there were history teachers, PE teachers, music teachers, art teachers. They all wanted to talk about different things. So the idea was good, but it just wasn't funded properly. It wasn't properly organized, I thought, to be as effective as it could have been.
And when you say funded, that's the amount of money that the education ministry, the government, is putting into the program. So as Reza said, underfunded means that there isn't enough money to make it effective.
Yep. Craig has already made the point. If the teachers aren't good at English and they're teaching you important subjects, that could do harm to your education in general. You got to get it right.
Next, we have a voice message from Edison from Quito, Ecuador.
Hi, Reza and Craig. I'm Edison Paul from Quito, Ecuador. It is always a pleasure to hear both of you. So your podcast and topics are very interesting. Don't change that methodology and enthusiasm to teach English to all of non-native English speakers in my case. By the way, I just graduated from university, and that is the reason that I would like to listen about interview vocabulary, hiring vocabulary, some tips to have a better performance during an English interview, because in Latin America for a foreign worker it's so important to do it well to be hired. That's all. I was Gray. We'll be in touch.
Thank you very much, Edison, for sending in your voice message. It's really good to hear from you. One small thing, you said listen about. Remember, the preposition with listen is listen to. So listen to.
Also, Edison, we understood that you're a fireman, but I think you said, but I wasn't sure because of the audio, it wasn't 100% clear, but I think you said fireman worker. You don't need the word worker, it's just fireman. Or if you were a woman, you could say firewoman. Or neutral, for either sex, firefighter.
I think that's more common these days, isn't it?
Yeah.
A firefighter, because it's not gender specific. And you asked about interview questions, interviews in English. We do have some resources that will hopefully help you and anyone who is preparing for an interview in English. If you go to episode 58, we spoke about job interview questions. That's inglespodcast.com/58. And how to have a job interview in English and some work vocabulary. That was back in episode 43. So inglespodcast.com/43. And we also have for sale a short course of how to pass a job interview. It's a PDF document and an audio, and it costs €12. So if you're interested in that, all of those links and a link to the job interview course is at inglespodcast.com/326.
We have now another voice message from Brazil.
Jessica from Brazil.
Hello, Rez and Greg. I'm Jessica from Brazil. First of all, I would like to say that I've been listening to you guys for a while, and I love it. I love it, your podcast. It's like my best one. And you are also clear. Your voices are so calm, and I can't understand it all, even though I speak Portuguese, but it's so cool. It's the best podcast to learn English. And I have a question. I don't know exactly what it is, but I would like to know the difference between when I say something like this is game change or this is game changing. So I don't know when to put like ing at the end of the word. So that's my question. I would be very happy to listen my voice audio in your podcast. Thank you. That's all. Bye-bye.
Well, Jessica, your voice message has absolutely been a game changer for Reza and I. All those lovely things that you said about us and our voices and our podcast, we really appreciate it. So what does game changer mean, Reza?
Game changer. It's quite a new expression for British people. I think it's been around in American English longer, but we've adopted it in British English, and I imagine Australia and lots of other countries as well. A game changer is an event, or maybe an idea or procedure or something like that affects a significant shift in the current way of doing things or the way of thinking about something. Or it could just be an event that changes, notably, a sports game. In fact, I think it originally comes from sports. So when something happens in the game that changes the game, so one team looked like they were going to win, then something happens and now it looks like they're going to lose, that's a game changer. So it's become a metaphor when an event happens and now things are going to be completely different.
So, for example, when Pelé was given the red card and sent off, and then the Brazilian national team only had 10 men playing on the football pitch, it was a real game changer. So that would be a more specific sports-centered example of where something happens and it completely changes the game. It completely changes the result of the game.
Craig, can you give an example of game-changing technology? There I'm using it as an adjective, so with ing, game-changing technology.
I think the smartphone has been game-changing technology. Putting a computer in your hand and letting you connect to the internet wherever you are is a game changer. So there's the noun, a game changer. In your message, Jessica, you didn't use the article a. When you're using game changer as a noun with er at the end, remember that article a. For example, for me, podcasting has been a game changer. It's really changed my life.
And for me and Craig and lots of our listeners perhaps, Brexit could be a real game changer for the UK and the EU. Up to now, things have been a certain way. There's been a certain relationship. So after Brexit, we don't know if you're listening to this before or after Brexit, by the way. We've recorded it before. Let's see what happens. But it could be a real game changer. The situation's going to be very different after, I suppose.
Reza, do you think that finding a vaccine for the coronavirus, for COVID-19, will be a game changer?
Do you know what? I don't. Does my answer surprise you?
It does. Why do you think that?
I think that the appearance of the coronavirus, that has been a game changer without any doubt. It totally changed the way we think about many things. Social interaction, hygiene, medical care. We've had to rethink many things. But the vaccine itself, let me put this to you, Craig. There is a vaccine for the flu, la gripe, influenza, the flu. The flu's been around many years. We've had many decades to work on the vaccine. There are various vaccines for the flu. None of them is anywhere near 100% effective. Nowhere near. In fact, I remember once, not long ago, getting the flu jab, the flu vaccine, and about 2 weeks later, I got the flu. It's not unusual at all. The no flu vaccine protects you against all types of flu. You're lucky if it protects you against about 60 or 70%, you're lucky. So is the vaccine for coronavirus going to be a game changer? I don't think it will. I don't think they'll be able to invent something to protect you against all strains, all varieties of the coronavirus. So I don't think it's going to make a huge difference, to be honest. Are you surprised to hear that?
I am surprised to hear it because I think it's going to be a game changer for me. If it's going to be, say, 70% effective, then it will be a game changer because I'll start traveling again. I don't know if I'll socialize a lot more here in Valencia, but I will definitely have more confidence to get on an aeroplane. So in that respect, traveling to other countries, going abroad, it will be a game changer. It will be a game changing thing.
Oh, by the way, I just want to clarify, I hope they do find a vaccine for coronavirus as quickly as possible. And I'm considering getting it myself. And I think, of course, all people who are in a delicate position, those most vulnerable, should get it. But I'm not sure it's going to be the game changer that people hope it will be.
Do you know what will be a game changer?
What?
Getting more voice messages from our wonderful listeners, because now it's your turn to practice your English. Please get in touch. Tell us your name, where you're from. And if you have any ideas for future episodes, we're always happy to get those from you so that we can plan future podcasts. Reza, how can people get in touch with us?
Well, our favorite way is that you leave a voice message on SpeakPipe. Record your message and send it to us at speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast. However, Craig, if people want, they could write an email, couldn't they?
That's right. You can reach me, Craig, Craig, at inglespodcast.com, or Reza is at belfastreza, Reza, at gmail.com. And if you're interested in paid online courses, you can visit the Mansion Ingles online store, which is at store.mansioningles.net.
Please keep listening to us. Who knows? We could become a game changer for your English like we have for Jessica. If you're keen to support us and help us in the future, you might consider becoming a sponsor in Patreon. What's that about, Craig?
people who support us on Patreon at patreon.com/inglespodcast can give a donation, and that donation goes to helping us continue podcasting and also providing transcriptions for our Patreon supporters. So you get all of the words sent to you by email, and you can follow the audio in a written transcription. I'd like to say a big thank you to our recent Patreon subscribers, people who have joined the program. They are Carlos Fernandez Garcia, thank you, Luis Andrea M. Coronado, Jose R.S., Paulo Cachadinha, Rafael Matallana, Stephanie, Jose Andrés Cuyas Hernandez, Mirsha Ortiz, Jesus Santander, and Rodrigo Delgado.
Oh, Craig went all Brazilian there. We've been talking earlier about Brazilian accents. He wanted to say Rodrigo Delgado.
Rodrigo Delgado. And by the way, Rodrigo said that he's improving his speaking by repeating our sentences. He also said that sometimes it's a bit difficult because we speak quite quickly. Well, remember, Rodrigo, you can always pause the podcast and then rewind or go back, and also slow down the audio so you can play it much slower if we're speaking a bit too quickly for you. Most audio players have the possibility to slow down to half speed or 3/4 speed, so we're speaking like this. And if you'd like to join those wonderful people for as little as $1.21, because now they're including the VAT, the value added tax. So it's a minimum of $1.21 per month, and you get instant access to recent transcriptions. That address again, patreon.com/inglespodcast. What's next week, Reza?
Next week we've got prevent and avoid.
And your questions answered. So thanks for your feedback. Until next week, stay safe, be careful. It's goodbye from me.
And bye-bye from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pids. The track is called See You Later.